Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF. Mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who truly understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify your fitness journey so you can lose fat, regain your confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Come on, let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host. And today's episode is coming very sun-kissed for you. I just got back a couple of days ago from a week away. My husband and I went to the French Polynesia. Amazing. Highly recommended. And I actually wanted to record this episode when I was there, just observing around and seeing the way people live. I started to see a lot of parallels and lessons that we can take from what I saw and the things that I was noticing around me and apply into fitness. I think that life is surrounded by parallels that we can look and learn in different areas of life. And this trip was no different. So I will share with you 3 fitness lessons that I learned from the island living experience for 1 week. But before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to a fan mail that we received. So if you look at the bottom in the show notes of the podcast, you're going to see that there is a way to send me a message. And I loved it. So this one was from Australia. It does not allow me to see the name of the person, but it is from Australia. And here is what she says. Love your podcast so much. I listen while I'm cleaning my house and I find them so inspirational and real. I can't express how much I appreciate your no BS attitude and approach. I'm 9 months into menopause and thriving, not just surviving. And I attribute this to your practical and very real advice. I spruik your podcast to anyone that will listen. Thank you very much about that. I appreciate it. Thank you for being you, being real and honest, and giving us women a positive, no BS role model and mentor. I'm in Australia, Perth, and everything you say still has total relevance even over here. Please keep up your real and inspirational podcasts. They are my therapy sessions and have changed my life dramatically. Big hugs to you, Nathalia. Thank you so much. This is amazing. Just a side note. I do not replace therapy. This is me just being somebody with a microphone and just talking to you guys about my life experience, okay? You always still need therapy. I think everybody needs therapy, but I digress. All right. So thank you so much. If you feel inclined to leave a review, to give a rating in all the podcast platforms, that's how you pay me back. And I'll be very, very grateful if you do it, because that's how we are able to spread the word and for people to see that the things that are being talked about here in this podcast are worth your while. There's so much crap out there on social media, podcasts, and things like that. So I understand and I appreciate your time listening. So I think that whenever you leave a review, it's a way to tell other people that, hey, listen, you're not going to be wasting your time by listening to this thing. So thank you so much. Now back to the conversation today. I don't know if you guys have ever been we were in a specific island called Moorea, which is one of the islands in the French Polynesia. And it is a very authentic island living. And I found that very fascinating because a lot of tropical places that you go to, being from a tropical place myself, a lot of times you have like the tourist area and then you have where the locals live or hang out kind of place. And it's funny because even whenever we were arriving, I was asking the taxi driver about restaurants. Hey, what restaurant would you go to? And then he's like, oh, this one. And I was like, no, but like, where are the restaurants that the locals go? And he looked at me funny. But after being there for a few days, I really understood that he looked at me funny because not really a difference between tourist things and local people things. It's just like that one thing. What you see is what you get. So I really like that. And it allowed me to watch. We had a little scooter. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw me and my husband on the scooter going around. It was amazing. And there are three things that I started to see that I wanted to talk to you about the parallels regarding fitness and the things that I saw in the island. And I'm going to leave you with a question here before I go into the first point. And I want you to think for a second. What if the way you're approaching your fitness journey is holding you back? Just like living an island or living in a very remote place can shape and limit how people see the world. Which then brings me to the first parallel that came to my mind whenever I was there. You know, the island that I was in had what, like 15,000 people, 18,000 people. And this is like big, like that's a quote unquote big island. And whenever I looked around, I actually asked my husband, I'm like, do they have Amazon? Like, do they have Uber Eats? Do they have Uber? Like, what is happening? And whenever you look at somebody who is born and raised in an island, that's all they know. They don't know any different from what is happening within that environment in which they grew up in, and that everybody around them subscribe to the same beliefs. And it's great. I'm sure it's amazing. It's chill and stuff like that, but it limits your exposure to other ways of doing things. It isolates you from, you know, different perspectives, different viewpoints, variety of culture. And as I was looking at that, it reminded me about how so many people go on when it comes to their fitness. And this is coming from speaking to thousands of women over the years. And it never ceases to amaze me how repeatedly people are always sticking to what they know and become very closed off to trying to see things from a different perspective, that maybe there is a different way. That just because this worked when you had no kids and you were 20 years old and your only responsibility was to have a clean underwear and make sure that you were not late for work, just because it worked then, it doesn't mean that it's going to work now. But because it is the only way individuals know how to do the thing, they keep on repeating that time and time again. And a lot of times intentionally isolating themselves and closing themselves off, almost like putting themselves in an island to different perspectives, to different ways of doing things. Whenever it comes to fitness, you can't ignore that life changes, that, you know, your body changes, your priorities change. You know, maybe before you had, all you know is to train for 2 hours, 3 hours a day and eat lettuce and ice cubes because that's what has always worked for you. And you had the time to spend 2-3 hours in the gym. But then now you're lucky if you get 30 minutes. But because all you know is the more mentality, or, you know, let's cut out all the carbs, then you close yourself off to different ways of doing things that might be more efficient. And speaking on efficiency, there were a lot of things that I was observing. And listen, I'm not passing judgment. It is just more from an observational standpoint. There were a lot of things that I saw because it is a very closed off place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There are a lot of things that are not done in a very efficient manner. But how are they going to be able to be extra efficient if all they know is the way they do it? Most people there probably have not been exposed to many different ways of doing things. I'm from a place in Brazil where, you know, maybe not a lot of people have the opportunity to see the world. And that's something that I experience also whenever I go to Brazil, that people are limited to what they know and they're missing out on so many different ways, more efficient ways, better ways of doing things and of living life, or of accomplishing their fitness goals, because they get so caught up on what they know. And that's it. So now that we're making this parallel, I would love to ask you to reflect here for a second. Do you think that you are putting yourself in an island? Do you think that you are stuck in a pattern that no longer serves you and doing the same thing repeatedly time and time again because that's what you know? But by doing that, you're limiting the possibilities of perhaps finding a much better way of getting to an outcome. But because you're so caught up on, oh, but this is what I know, this is what I know. And maybe that's what is keeping you stuck. Think about it for a second. Are you still doing the same thing that you did when you were in college? Are you trying to maintain the same amount of training now that there are a lot of other things going on in your life and maybe you don't have as much energy and time to dedicate to fitness because you have different priorities in life? And then you keep on getting frustrated because it doesn't work. But are you opening yourself up to different possibilities, or are you living in that island that only you know? Think about it for a second. Now we're going to move on to the second parallel that I made. So I love to check the weather. I actually made an Instagram story that I had put on my weather app, the location that I was going, the French Polynesia. And I was checking the weather every single day. And then one day I didn't realize that I was looking at the French Polynesia, and I dressed my kids for the 80-degree weather that was there instead of the 40-degree weather that was in Texas. So they went to school in flip-flops and shorts because I didn't realize that I was dressing them for the French Polynesia. But anyway, so I was checking the weather every single day. And I kid you not, every day when I opened the app, it told me that it was going to be raining the whole time that I was there. And I was like annoyed in advance. I was checking the weather and I'm like, see, what's the point? And I was like bitching, complaining about it to my husband. And he's like, but let's wait until we get there. And I'm like, no, but it's showing here and blah, blah, blah. And I was getting annoyed about the data that the phone was giving me because the Weather Channel sure is going to give me the right data. It turns out that whenever we got there, we had sun, like I am burned. My lips burned, my forehead burned. I was actually happy when a cloud came into the sky and covered the sun for like 3 seconds because it was so hot. And I'm not complaining about being so hot. I'll take so hot any day, especially now as it's starting to get cold here in Texas. But you get my point. If I had gone by just the data that the weather app was giving me, and not gone there to see it for myself and things like that, I would have missed out. So data is important. I'm a big fan of research. I'm a big fan of data. But it is important that you don't become so obsessed with data that you forget to analyze yourself as a human being and to listen to biofeedback. The way that I see this happening in fitness is with people obsessing over their smartwatch. Oh, my smartwatch said that I have burned 1,500 calories during my workout. So therefore, I can do all the things. I'm like, but are you hungry? And like those things are inaccurate. Stop it. But people are so obsessed with that data that they forget to have self-awareness and to almost like have a chit chat with themselves, have like a little staff meeting with the two brain cells that they have. And like, okay, do I really need to eat all this extra? Another way that I see this, which that's the reason I loved my Oura ring. Loved my Oura ring. If you don't know what Oura ring is, it's, a ring that you use on your finger and it gives you your step count, tells you about your sleep and things like that. And I start to notice that I would wake up and the first thing that I would look at the data from the Oura ring. And then if the Oura ring told me that I had a shitty night of sleep, even if I felt great, I would almost convince myself that I felt shitty just because my Oura ring said that I had a bad night's sleep. So I was letting the data on my Oura ring dictate how I felt, even if I looked at the data and it said, you had a terrible night's sleep, but I feel great. I mean, I can't conquer the world right now, but I would start to kind of convince myself otherwise just because that's what the data said. And a quick side note here also about the smartwatches and the data on energy expenditure, which is the amount of calories that you burn. Relying on that data is not only problematic because it doesn't allow you to feel, because you're looking at that watch and you're like, oh, I worked so hard. He already told me that I burned, 500 calories, but you know that you have more in the tank, but you're limiting yourself because you already feel like you reached the ceiling that your watch is telling you. That's the problem number one. It's not allowing you to feel your workouts, not allowing you to feel what it's like to push you to your limits. And the other problem with relying on the data for energy expenditure from a smartwatch is that they can be up to 96%, 98% inaccurate. I can't recall like the exact data, but it's very close to 100% inaccurate whenever it comes to energy expenditure. So you're relying on a data that is inaccurate and is putting you in a place where you are becoming a bit disconnected with yourself. And I also see this happening with tracking data on MyFitnessPal, for example. I love MyFitnessPal whenever you're tracking your meals and things like that. But one thing that we need to understand is that MyFitnessPal is a user database. So you can have somebody that puts in that a chicken breast, like 4 ounces of chicken breast is like 10 calories. And you can have somebody that puts that 5 ounces of chicken breast is 1,500 calories. And because they are putting the data and it's like, oh no, but I'm eating, 1,400 calories because whenever I track here on MyFitnessPal, it's 1,400 calories. So I'm in a calorie deficit and I'm not losing weight. It's incredibly contradictory because if you are not losing weight, by default, you are not in a caloric deficit. Losing fat is a byproduct of being in a caloric deficit. But people get so obsessed with just looking at the data and forget to take a few steps back and be like, okay, so where may the data be a bit off? Especially whenever we're looking at the data from something that is a lot of times not as accurate as we would like to believe. So data is important, but it is also important to take a step back and bring self-awareness, context, and common sense to the data so we can truly make educated choices instead of just believing it at face value, like I had believed at face value at the weather app that was telling me that was going to rain every single day. But I forgot that it is, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And maybe it is not as accurate as it is here because it's a more tropical weather and there are changes that happen more quickly. So data is cool, love data, but it does not replace self-awareness to see how your body is responding to things. So every time that you're looking at data, it is also important to self-assess and almost like do a how do I feel today checklist. Okay, I believe that I'm eating a calorie deficit, but I'm not losing weight. Then maybe there is some mismatch here on the data. It's kind of like the scale as well. I think the scale is a very important tool, but it's not an absolute tool because it is not measuring, water retention. It's not measuring, if you have inflammation from a very hard workout that is going to by default retain some water. It is not an absolute data. So this is how we need to look at information instead of looking at it as absolute. And, that's the lesson I learned from my weather app. And the third parallel is embracing island time. I don't know if you guys know what island time is. If you don't, I'm going to explain here real quick. Is something that is very slower paced. One thing at a time. We're moving slow. There is no rush to do anything, which for me, it kills me. Why? Because I like things done yesterday. So that was something that I had to adapt and have a few deep breaths and just go with the flow. And one thing that I noticed also whenever it came to island time and paying attention on the journey, on the experience, a lot of times the things that we did there that took a little bit of a while to get to because we were in a little scooter and in the island, there is just basically one road that goes all the way around the island. That is one road going and one road coming back. So if you're in a rush, tough life. If there is traffic ahead of you, you're going to be there for a minute. There wasn't a lot of traffic, but there were a lot of scooters. And there were some times that we would set to go to this place that was supposed to be, amazing, which most places there were incredible. But one thing that I started to realize is that the most beautiful parts of a lot of the things that we did were in the journey. And whenever I stopped the rush to get to the destination and I started to appreciate everything that I was seeing and that I was experiencing throughout the way, like getting from A to B, like literally going through from A to B, start to look around. I'm like, holy shit, the sea is beautiful. Oh my, look at that little cave. Oh my goodness, maybe we should stop here next time. I started to see that it wasn't just about the destination, but it was about the journey, getting there. And that's kind of what it kicked for me with embracing the island time in the journey when it comes to fitness, is that so many people want to rush through their fitness journey. They're always, what is the fastest way that I can get there? And it's like, now, that they don't realize that, especially whenever we're talking about fat loss, it is not about how fast you can get from A to B. It is about everything that you learn along the way that will teach you how to appreciate whenever you get to whatever the initial goal that you had was. And I think that many of you listening have had the experience of losing weight as fast as possible. And, I'm going to lose 50 pounds in 3 months, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But by doing that, you are not preparing yourself. You're not going through the journey, and you're not appreciate the process of getting from accomplishing each milestone, which is going to build the foundation that is going to allow you to stay there. There is always that need, that urgency for the quickest result, the fastest way to get there. How can I lose, all the way as fast as possible? How can I build all the muscle as fast as possible? And more times than not, those strategies do not prepare you to be able to maintain that. For example, today I had a call with a lady and she was describing to me how she had worked with somebody else. And, I didn't see any big red flags on the thing that she was describing from this person that she was working with. And listen, this is not about judging how other coaches do their thing. Everybody has their own system. But as she was walking me through the process in which she went through with this particular coach, she described that whenever life got busy and she started a more demanding career and things like that, she wasn't able to maintain because the way she had learned gave great results very quickly, but it didn't prepare her for whenever life happened. And this is a juggle that as fitness professionals, we constantly have to keep an eye on, because obviously we want to give results to people that invest their money in our services. But at the same time, we also understand that speeding up the process too much is going to remove crucial milestones that will build a solid foundation for that person to be able to have autonomy and knowledge to make decisions as life happens, because life be lifing. Okay? I think that I speak for everybody here. Life be lifing. It just is. But if you're going through that process too fast without building solid foundations that will allow you to make decisions and make choices and not feel deprived as life be lifing, you're going to keep on going back to square one. So that is how the slower pace and the journeys in which my husband and I went in our little scooter throughout Moorea Island helped me realize that a lot of the times the beauty and the reward is more in the journey, the things that you see, the things that you learn, the things that you experience in the journey, more so than the actual outcome, especially when it comes to fitness, because I've been doing this for 15 years. It's very rare that somebody has, let's say a goal of losing 20 pounds. And whenever they get to the 20 pounds, they're like, yep, that's it. I'm done. By the time they get to the 20 pounds, they have already set another goal. I don't know. I want to look jacked. I want to have a six pack. There is always that next goal that is going to come. So if you do not learn how to appreciate the journey, you are going to live in a constant state of frustration because there is always going to be that next goal. So if you do not learn how to enjoy the journey and learn with the journey and build the foundation with the journey, you are going to live in a perpetual state of frustration because there is always going to be another goal. And there is nothing wrong with that. I love me some good fitness goals. I don't think that you need to live for them, and everything fitness related needs to be like with a very big, specific, huge goal. But high achieving people always have some kind of goal. So by focusing on the journey and taking one day at a time, you're going to be setting yourself up for success, not just on the now, but in the long run as well. So what are the things that right now you're rushing in your fitness journey that you feel that are not setting you up for success in the long run? Think about it. So these were the three parallels that I was able to envision as I was living the island life. I'm going to do a quick recap here for you. The first one was that by being in an island, whenever I looked around, that is all you know. It's no different than for those, whenever it comes to fitness, that have been doing the same thing for a long time. But then whenever life happens, priority changes, they don't know how to pivot because they are so stuck in their own little fitness island of thinking that that's the only way of doing things, when in reality, there are many different ways of doing things that, depending on what season of life that you're in, might be much more efficient and much less frustrating and are going to drive results in a much more fulfilling manner. So that's parallel number one. Parallel number two is that we need data, but we also need context for that data. So many times we let data by itself in a vacuum dictate our lives, be that the data from our smartwatches, be that the data from the sleep data thingy from Oura Rings or whatever, or the data from MyFitnessPal, which it is a great tool, but it is not an absolute tool. So we need to look at data with some self-awareness as well and some contextual assessment, the same way that I needed some contextual assessment of the weather that I was looking at that was in the tropical place, which can change. And then parallel number three was embracing the island time, slow down and appreciate the process. The long-term success of any journey is going to come from living the process and learning how to enjoy the process and learning how to see the beauty in the grind and the things along the way, the things that you learn to appreciate. And I learned this from a lot of the scooter rides with my husband in the island. So with these three parallels that I talked about here with you, I really want to take a moment and ask you to ask yourself, what are the beliefs that you have that you are putting yourself in an island because you're refusing to see things from a different perspective? I'm pretty sure there is something. I mean, there are some things even like for me, and I try to be incredibly open-minded whenever it comes to different ways of doing fitness. There was another episode that I recorded recently. I think it was last episode where I talked about the things that I no longer align with and that I believed at some point. And that's something that is very important in fitness, to be open-minded that there are different ways of doing things. And whenever you become married to that one specific idea, you put yourself in an island and you become stuck. I also want you to ask yourself, what are the datas that you are, like the data points that you're obsessing over? Maybe you're obsessing over the scale 24/7. And listen, I think that the scale has value, but it should not be an absolute. There are a lot of variables that need to be taken into account when you're looking at the scale. Are you obsessing over the amount of calories that you're burning that your smartwatch told you, even though they can be up to, 95, 96, 98% inaccurate? Is that really worth the stress? What are the datas that you're looking at without context and without self-awareness to see how you feel. And last but not least, what are the processes, especially when it comes to fitness, that you're trying to speed up, that is not allowing you to become the person that you need to become in order to maintain what it is that you're trying to accomplish? Because, if we're talking about fitness, there's no shortage of ways to lose fat. I say it all the time. Any idiot can lose weight by drinking detox teas for a week and eating nothing else. But are you going to be able to maintain that loss? Probably not, because it didn't really teach you a lot in that process. So what are the processes that you are trying to speed up and not allowing yourself to become something in the process so that you can set yourself up for success whenever you do get to that initial goal, which by the time you get to that initial goal, you're already going to have another goal. So these are the 3 pearls. I would love to hear your opinion, if there is anything you'd like to add. And if you have any feedback or any topics that you'd like me to talk about, send me a message on the grams. The link is down in the description, in the show notes. And if you have any insight or anything you'd like to ask me, holler, send me a message on Instagram, or send me a fan mail, which the link is down in the show notes as well. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to put your review as well. Really important to me. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram. Links are down below as well. And let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. This is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.